Executives from 7 major tech companies are at the White House today as President Biden announces voluntary commitments from them to help move forward to what the White House is calling a safe, secure, and transparent development of AI technology. These new commitments include one that people will notice broadly, potentially, which is a push to put a digital watermark on AI-generated audio and video so it's clear when something has been faked. But the commitment that may have the biggest impact here is an effort to allow internal and external security testing of AI systems before they are released in an attempt to spot any harmful programs and make sure AI, doesn't spiral out of control, Terminator style. The White House is walking a delicate line here, though, because they want to ensure the safety of AI technology, but they also have to make sure that these innovations are done here inside the United States. And so as a result, these new commitments are voluntary only, and they will not carry the force of law. But as Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo said on CNBC this morning, this is just the first step in a longer process.
Ultimately, Congress will pass a law which will have teeth and penalties and enforcement. And that, of course, will take some time. And so that's why we are saying, let's do this as a first step.
She said this is a bridge to regulation here. We expect to see the president making those remarks on AI to outline this agreement coming up very soon in the Roosevelt Room. Dom, back over to you.
Okay, so Eamon, this is a big deal because right now it's in essence the walk-up, if you want to call it that, right, to this idea that there could be more broad-ranging, wide-sweeping type regulations around what's been a very early-stage development for artificial intelligence. What exactly is the hope for what the conversation involves today with these big tech executives? Is there anything that groundbreaking maybe that's expected from these conversations?
Well, look, I think the hope ultimately is that there's some sort of legal regime that comes out of Congress on all of this. And I think as you look at it right now, what we've got is a handshake deal between these tech companies and the White House. There's no force of law behind it at all. So for now, this is a very tentative and voluntary regulatory regime that's being built around AI. We'll see if it works. And then, of course, what Raimondo said on CNBC earlier today is the administration is working with allies around the world. She mentioned the Japanese, for example, as one ally the United States is reaching out to here, because this is going to be a global phenomenon. So regulation doesn't work necessarily if it's only domestic. So what they're doing is trying to start the process here in the United States and then reach out globally and see what they can do to bring at least the sort of democratic world, for lack of a better expression, into an AI regulating regime overall.
And Eamon, one more quick point before we kind of move this conversation forward a little bit. China is always a big part of the discussion when it comes to artificial intelligence, the supercomputing arms race, if you will. Yeah. How much will that factor into perhaps some of the administration's concerns about where the U.S. sits from a competitive standpoint against the world's second biggest economy, and one that, by the way, we go back and forth against about who's the biggest supercomputing power in the world?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's huge. I think you just put your finger exactly on it, right? I mean, China obviously not a signatory to this. This event is not taking place in Beijing. It's taking place in Washington, D.C. So that has implications. So what the administration is trying to do is have this regulatory regime start to come into place, but not so intensely that it drives innovation out of the United States. They are very wary about China taking the lead in AI. That's something they absolutely do not want. The intelligence community doesn't want it. The White House doesn't want it for political and economic reasons. And so you can see them trying to struggle with that. But that's just the reality of the world that we live in, Don.
All right, Eamon, stick around here. Let's bring into the conversation now Steve Kovac, also Steve Leisman. Steve, there are a lot of companies here, but it doesn't sound like legislation is anytime, at any point, going to be very close in the offing. So when we talk about names like NVIDIA, which has been at the forefront of this, and of course Microsoft, OpenAI, how exactly are these companies factoring in their future financial health,
right,
given this conversation happening right now?
Yeah, exactly. And look, to be fair, these companies have been calling for regulation since the beginning of the year when we all started talking about AI and the buzz really ramped up. And so to Eamon's point, They're getting some of that here. They have this agreement with the White House, not enforceable, of course. But how does that figure in financially? Well, take a look at what some of these individual companies are trying to do. A lot of the regulatory ideas out there are saying, hey, let's look at your data sets. How are you training? What data are you using to train your AIs? Google, Microsoft, OpenAI, they don't want to show that. So when it comes to some of these common ideas of what these AIs are being trained on and some of the deeper regulations that are being sought after, they're actually kind of against it in a lot of ways. So, look, I'll quote Senator Mark Warner, who came out with a really interesting statement right after this happened. I'll just read part of it right here. He said, while we often hear AI vendors talk about their commitment to security and safety, we have repeatedly seen the expedited release of products that are exploitable, prone to generating unreliable outputs, and susceptible to misuse.